Hey, it's Don the Auction Professor here. I'm going to throw out another BOLO today. It's something that I do find. Again, all these items that I'm showing you, you're not going to find all the time. You might if you're like me and you look around and you've got some sources, but overall, it's going to be new to you. So the more items you know to look for, the better off you will be. Today, we're going to talk about ink wells, ink bottles and ink wells. You know, we sell them quite often. We even sell die-cut scrap from the Victorian era, print ads from, up into the 20s, ink items, printer items. But for the most part, ink wells are what we look for a lot because we can find them fairly often, or at least ink jars. But we're going to talk about those today. We're going to go over the screen right now and we're going to show you some. Okay, so ink wells and ink bottles. Now, the big difference here, what most people aren't aware of, an ink well is something you put the actual ink into from the main bottle, and an ink bottle is the bottle that it was sold in. So that's basically the difference. An ink well wouldn't necessarily have been sold at all with ink in it. It would be a separate luxury to actually be able to buy the ink. So anyway, that's the big difference, and that's usually where people aren't sure on. So anyway, ink wells run all over the gambit. There's tons of them worth thousands and thousands of dollars. It's a huge category. And I do find them quite often. Ink wells and ink bottles. I look for ink bottles more so than ink wells. Not that, that the bottles are always worth more or anything like that, but I find more ink bottles as opposed to ink wells because most people don't realize some things are ink bottles. I'm going to show you both. I'm just going to show you a small section of each one, just to give you an idea on what's out there. Now, this is a Bakelite. Now, Bakelite, Cataline, or whatever you'd like to call it, stuff goes for a ton of money. This one's $2,458. They've weighted. I don't know why they weighed it. The test-wise, I am not up on the test. Let's see what it says about the test. Actually, it doesn't say what the test is. I'll probably have to look that up because I'm curious. I've heard there was a test. I have no idea what it was called or anything like that. But apparently this bona fides it as... there's even some damage to it. But anyway, this is just what it is. This is a huge chunk of the material. You can still find chunks of Bakelite from the factory that you can just buy Bakelite and make your own stuff still to this day, believe it or not. That's authentic. I've seen huge chunks of it in slabs. How they show up, where they show up, I have no idea. I have not seen one personally, but I know they're there. Here's a fancy one. Ink would go down there and the bottom would be my guess. Right there you can see it. But this is typical of the ornateness of these. And this is bronze, cold painted, meaning it wasn't fired in there. It's just painted on the outside. And you find those too. This is pretty interesting one. I really like this one, honestly. It's very artistic and miniature-wise. I love miniatures and dioramas. So this one's $2,150. And I said there's tons of them. This is Spode. Spode does Chinaware and things like that. I don't know if it's marked on the top. I see, yeah, it does look like it's marked right there. Usually Spode is just the China in that aspect of it. This has the whole thing. This is pretty interesting, though. Rather interesting piece, but anyway, this is a good item here. Let's see, $857.94. Now here's another. Figural ones are my favorite. Figural and anthropomorphic. Now this one's obviously made to be a ship. It's brass. It's on a shell on the bottom. And then mother of pearl, if you're not familiar with what it actually is, it's literally a chunk of a shell that's been filed, sanded, and shaped into something. This is real thin pieces. These are very delicate. The rope on these would probably be like a chain, I would imagine, brass. Yeah, it looks like brass. And then they usually just inset a bottle of some sort, which is that right there. Ink bottle, ink well. That's basically an ink well as opposed to a bottle. A bottle is going to be sealable, too. Keep that in mind. This isn't sealable. It just shuts with a hinged lid. So anyway, $795. Now that one's really interesting. I really love some of these styles and techniques they use to make these.
Now here's Tiffany. This is, probably they're going to list it as a bottle, but it's, yeah, it says, actually they did it as an inkwell, that's correct. Inkwell again, because it wasn't sold in this. This isn't a bottle you would purchase the item in. This is something you would put it in. So again, that's the big difference. And that's, again, as I said, the number one thing I hear mixed up from everybody who talks or discusses or knows or tries to get into bottles. When they're first starting off, they don't know the difference between a ink bottle and an ink well. So just not to drill it in or assume anything, but anyway, 604 on the Tiffany. Now this one, yeah, this is inkwell too. This one could go either way, it's possible, but as a general rule, they never sold the actual ink in anything fancy. It was just a plain everyday item because, you know, anybody could buy the ink. This was something that was a luxury, so they would never sell a commodity in the item. So that's, again, it could be called a bottle by some people, but it's just an ink well in the shape of a bottle, I would say. $5.95. And as I said, we've got bottles at the end here. $496.99, so basically $497 for this one. Figural's head comes off. I've seen similar ones to this. They're usually very high priced. This one's very, very nice. I really like this one here too, again, as I said. Some of these are marked on the bottom, some aren't. This one doesn't look like it is from the description. Typical way, they're heavy on the bottom. They always are, so it's harder to tip these over. So that's probably a big chunk of bronze at the base. Or it's part of the actual chamber that holds the ink. Chances are it's just a bronze base and the rabbit itself holds the ink. Again, you want weight. That's why they're usually narrow, or I mean wide at the bottom and, you know, not very tall. They're just kind of, you know, short and wide, I guess you could say. Most ink bottles. More Figural, $475. This is really unique. I really like these two. Only one has ink in it. That's the top one there you can see. And it's marked too, which is awesome. The marked ones are always my favorite. Geschütz is, I think, made in or something along that line. It's a German mark, of course, but anyway. Rather nice piece. So $475 on that one. And another one, this is Dog, like an Irish setter or something like that. Very unique one too. It looks like a double one. Yeah, inkstand. One could be something else, but you can see a pen sitting in there too. Very nice piece, very nice set. The pen looks like it's a dog's head. Yep, very nice one here. This is pretty interesting indeed. $485, not as much as I would have thought it would go for, but it's a newer one. 1900s, early 1900s, 1910, 20s. 1880s, 90s one here. Bronze. This one's adorable. I really like this one too. The bags, the whole aspect of it. This, again, it's like a diorama almost. It looks like Boots in the background. He's waiting for his master. He's holding his umbrella for him because it's raining outside or something along that line. Now, some of these you'd see the little vessel inside, the pottery or glass, depending on, you know, what the make of it is. That's usually what you see. Now, some of the ones we've shown you are missing that. So it doesn't mean it's not included. They are just literally missing that item there. So anyway, let's move on to the next one. $370 on this one. Now this is a traveling one. Let me see if I can show you how it opens and what's in it. This one seals for the most part. It's usually got some way to seal it. That's what I've seen on every one that says traveling. It'll have a plug or something on it, and that literally seals it. Let me see here. That's probably a dabber to soak it up on the other side, the light-colored item. Oh, it's actually a brush. Not really sure what you'd use the brush for. I'm not up on all the fanciness of, you know, of the day, but I know most of the basics. The brush may be cleaning your brush off or the nibs off or something. I don't really know. $352. Somebody will probably shout out what it is, but you see a brush once in a while, or a blotter, a small sopping tool or something like that, or even a siphon sometimes. Now, crow was a huge thing, the crows back in the day. Crows back in the day were a big thing. Even at a certain point, it was a caricature that they would show inebriated all the time. And why, I have no idea, but that's just what it is. And it was always this bird-looking thing here. This is 1870s or 80s would be my guess by the looks of it. And it went for $295. Now, it looks like it's on a stand. I don't think underneath the four-leaf clover that that part was original to this. Glass ink container missing. So it's got the insert missing, which is basically what that means. Nothing on the inside. I think it's just sitting on that stand. Maybe it's included or not. I would have to have asked if I was interested in it. But $295. Now this one's kind of morbid in my book. It's a real turtle that's been stuffed and turned into this. I don't even think you could legally sell this, depending on the variety of turtle. Somehow it missed, or whatever the case may be. But some of these are illegal to sell. It's an endangered species, and you can't sell some of these. I don't know about this specific turtle, but I'm surprised it wasn't brought up, honestly. It looks like it's bronze, but it's not. It's a real, taxidermy item. $250 basically on this. It's unique. It's interesting. I don't think I would have messed with it, just because the negativity I would have probably gotten from people who, would have been mad about, doing that to a turtle. But, anyway. This is a rather interesting one. Now, this is a one that will show up, this kind of inkwell. Somebody's put little, felt feet on it just so it doesn't scratch it anymore. It's designed at the end like this so that you can dab the nib tip against this, and it'll hopefully knock some of the extra ink off, so you're not blobbing and putting blotters and big blobs of ink on your paper when you're working on it. So anyway, $795. Now, these are running into the ink bottle. Now, what they would have sold it in. This one says turtle. That's just basically like a shaped moniker for this specific one. It's not really what it is. It's just a shape. It's well marked, too. So this is a name brand. There's some name brands that you're always going to see. Now, the number one I always look for is Carter's. Carter's is everywhere, and J and IEM is another brand that you will see. This one and Carter's are like the two I usually find, and they're usually small, little tiny bottles like this. They usually held an ounce or 2 ounces of ink. And as you see, it's low to the ground, so it's harder to knock over. They usually have a fat, big base to it, so again, you don't knock it over. Now, this is an earlier type. Again, this is how they were sold. This is what you would have bought in the store. Now, you see it is wider at the bottom, so it is harder to knock over, too. This isn't quite as wide, but this is early on, 1850 about, and that's probably pretty well right on. Pontil means this scar you see. That's where it was blown and then knocked off well, not blown. It was blown from the other side, but this is the side that would have held it at some point. They could have blown it on this and moved it around. I've seen, glass made, dozens and dozens of times in person. Right in town, there's a huge museum here that does glass blowing anyway. So that's a pontil scar. And sometimes they'll heat it up really, really hot at the end, and it'll smooth it out so it's not rough. But sometimes they're rough even. This is an early crude one. $636 for this one. Another bottle, crude. Crude is what you usually look for in these. That's what people want. It looks older, earlier. This one could be 1860s or 70s as well. $459. And this is typical. Flared lip is how it broadens out at the top. It's not just some globbed on big top. It's been flattened out and flared out is what that is. Pontil again, which is what I've showed you. It's thin too, which is usually not what you see on a lot of these. And it's something that was bid on. 39 different bids. This is iffy on this. If you know what you're doing in this field, it's fine to put a bid up for a real high amount if you can research it enough. Now, I've seen some in, dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of bottles. So I have a little upper on them, and I know most of the big names in them just because I've run into them before. But if you're not up on it, you might want to do an auction. You may not get as much, but at least you're not going to get screwed on, giving it away too easily. So anyway, $455 on this one. Here's a Carter's, perfect example. Just the label or printed material from Carter's always sells for us, always. This is trademark 1883. That doesn't mean this was made in 1883, but sometime after that point. They didn't put a date in the title, which is good. That's probably a bin number or a museum or item number on the bottom. They put that comes off. It's on like a grease pencil or pen, whatever you want to call it. And I've used some of those too in past on certain items like this. It's easy, and as I said, it does wash off. To get that ink off right off the bottom there, just at Expo would take it off in about a second. So anyway, $445. Let's move on here. Now this one I think is missing a lid of some sort that would have held the cork in. Now that's a replacement cork, pretty obviously in my book. especially by the chipping at the top edge there. Again, as I said, it would have probably had something else up there, like a top of a foot or something. The shape just isn't right at the top in my book. That would leave the spout part of the bottle in jeopardy if it got dinged or hit by something. So I'm pretty sure this was missing something. Just honestly, it just doesn't strike me as, what you would find. Either way, $495. Déposé means made in, basically, and in Paris, it's a vintage marking you'd find on items. This is 1880s, 90s, probably, I would guess. $495, as I said. Now, some of these Cobalt ones. Now, this is one of the most forged ones I've run into, modern day, because there's companies that reshoot or recast some of these. And believe it or not, sometimes when they're molds that make some of these, you can find molds, not this particular one because this is hand blown, but sometimes you'll find the actual mold and people will redo these. Some of these are hand blown, but they were blown into a mold, so there's many different techniques to make bottles. If you're interested, I would honestly recommend looking it up on YouTube. There's plenty of videos on the construction of vintage bottles. And if you like glass in general, Mythbusters Tested has a big thing on flexible glass and all kinds of stuff, Gorilla Glass and glass in general. So anyway. But this is rather interesting, an original one. If you've seen a bunch of these, it's easier to tell the originalness on it. Bubbles in the glass and ripples and the orange peel look on the outside in some spots and things like that. But once you've seen enough of vintage glass, you can pretty much tell the difference. At least I can, for the most part, every time. Another one with the label. Britain's another main name brand. So again, you'll find these, and you can see the bubble right there above the label, and little striations and orange peelish to the bottle too. It's not perfectly smooth. The lips kind of wavy. It looks like a chip in the lip too, from what I saw. Let's see if you can see it. Yeah, you can see the chip. There's actually a couple chips. It still had 37 bids and went for $373. Basically $374. Again, because these are rare, and there's a Ponto scar on the bottom. That's a better image of a Ponto scar. Again, this one wasn't flashed with real hot flare at the end, so it's still kind of sharp on the bottom, believe it or not. But anyway, this one's like a pottery one, it looks like. Yeah, pottery. And they put labels, paper labels on pottery ones too. Any bottle that's old, that's ink, that has a paper label on it, it's usually worth buying. Any. I can't think of one that's old like this pre-1930s that wouldn't be. You just got to know your age on some of these and age on the bottles. Newer ones will still sell, but they won't sell for much. If you get pay $1 for a Carter's, like a 1960s or 70s Carter's bottle, you might get $8-10 for it if you're lucky. So, and that's probably on average. It may take a month or so to sell at that price too, but you're going to sell it. But I stick to the 30s, 40s, and before usually, and you're going to do very well, I promise you. Now this is a typical kind you will find. This is rare. Civil War before era probably. This one's dug, so these will show up at sites. I've bottle dug a couple times with somebody who does it, who's got the rods and all that. And we've went to, stream beds and things like that and found some really nice bottles with them before. And I've also dug at some privy sites and some stuff like that. So I don't mind digging for them. It's fun. I'm just not up on it, and I don't know enough research to track down these spots, but he does it, and I've been with him, as I said. So it's an enjoyable thing if you like finding old glass. You hit a good spot, which we did once or twice, and you could turn up hundreds of good bottles. Some of these people can make a living just on digging bottles, believe it or not. As I said, you get the right spot, you can find, hundreds of bottles, and some of them, you could dozens of bottles that could be worth $1,000 or more a piece from one location. So you could do a couple days of digging and, make $20,000, believe it or not, in the right spot. Now, of course, it's rare, and you've got to really know what you're doing, and you've got to have researched your material. But anyway, that's about it. $352, again, 30 bids on this one. Another one here now. Standard is another ink company. You'll see American Standard Ink. Most of these items you'll find trade cards for. Carter's especially. I've had many Carter's trade cards and advertisements. There's Carter's postcards. There's Carter's envelopes, advertising material, flyers, broadsides, newspaper ads. There's ads in magazines for Carter's, because Carter's, if I'm not mistaken, still is around. But anyway, $432 on this one. The color is really, really nice. You can see how crude it's made. The actual top edge of the neck of the bottle is even tilted. It's wavy. It's not uniformed. So, you know, generic, you can tell by the age on these, by the looks of the bottle for the most part. Again, there are some reproductions. This Schoolhouse one is one that I've seen reproduced. Let's see what the bottom looks like. Yeah, this one looks like a good one here to me. But they will, Wheaton's and stuff like that makes vintage reproduction bottles that look identical to the originals. I have found a real nice one the other day, but it was so damaged it just wasn't worth it. Some of these ones show up, so in some cases a broken one of these will still sell, even in a couple pieces to the right person or the right bottle, so just keep that in mind. This one's $294. Now here's another Cobalt Civil War. I love the color on this one here. This is unadulterated. You can just, it almost glows from the lighting they have on here, which is really nice. It almost looks like it's pottery from this image, but this is a real nice one. The cork, again, is probably just a replacement. 9 out of 10 of the corks I usually see on these bottles are just replacement, just junk basically, but they fit it. People want a cork with it at least. Real or not, the bottle is what they're paying for. So $300 with 21 bids. Again, you can do bins on these if you know what you got and just put $500 on it and just be done with it. Some maybe $600 on the right bottle. It just depends. You can look most of them up though. And the last one, Harrison's. This is something you're going to find occasionally, some of these. I do find them, and only because most people don't realize it is a ink bottle. They just don't realize it. You know, and some of these will show up in these colors without the Ponto scar. This one has it. Let's see if I can show you one more. Yeah, there it is. Hang on, sorry. There it is. Now, this one looks like it could have been flashed a little bit and heated up. You can see a seam or a mold mark running across horizontally the bottle. That's typical. Some of these would have been blown into like a wood mold or some kind of mold, and that's where it would have got the impression of the name and things like that on it. So, or it would have totally been mold made, you know, from the start. But this one is, you know, hand blown because of the Ponto scar on the bottom. So anyway, that's basically it, the gist on it. Now, I could go into details and spend hours talking about this material. You need to look into it somewhat. If you can't find it, there's no sense in spending your time on it. But you look enough, you're going to find some of these. Estate sales, auctions for sure, 100%. Even antique malls, I can find some that are worth some good money that I can flip pretty easily. Sometimes people think they're trinket boxes, and that's why you can get them cheap sometimes. So anyway, that's what I got for you today.
Well, there you go. There's another item, inkwells and ink bottles. You know, it's a huge area. There's tons of them. Sometimes it doesn't have the label, so you won't even know what it is. Sometimes you'll find an old jar and you're not sure. But any of those items can be profitable, as you do see. So that's what I have for you today. Hopefully that gave you some ideas and some thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified when we post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell a friend.